Now, you may have heard me say in one of my previous videos that I am quite the Scooby-Doo fan. This is true. I grew up with this IP. When I was a small child, I'd be watching Scooby-Doo Where Are You reruns on Cartoon Network before Toonami would come on. I'd be watching it on sick days when I was sick in the middle of the day. When I would go visit my family elsewhere, I'd be watching the Boomerang channel, where they would have all sorts of Scooby stuff from the made-for-TV movies, the Red Shirt Shaggy era, 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, Scooby is Scrappy, the Scooby-Doo movies, the new Scooby-Doo movies. There's so much Scooby-Doo over almost like 60 years now, almost, just about. Let's see, 68, 78, 88, 98, 2008, 2018. Alright, in about 5 years, it'll be 60 years. It'll be 60 years of Scooby-Doo, man. It's nuts to think about. It's nuts. And almost a lifetime of Scooby-Doo for some of these people who grew up with this stuff. So, yes, I grew up with Scooby-Doo. I really enjoyed it. It's one of my comfort shows. Now, I may have fallen out of favor with Scooby-Doo after the What's New Scooby-Doo era. Once What's New Scooby-Doo... I love What's New Scooby-Doo. But once What's New Scooby-Doo went away, it was replaced with something called Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue. Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue wasn't exactly my cup of tea at the time. I didn't really care for the new animation, though I argued in the previous video that the pup named Scooby-Doo was also a very different animation, though that animation was still technically in-house. There was still very much a Hanna Barbera feel to it. Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue was more of a WB feel. It's more like the WB side of the family, the newer WB side of the family. It was more of a Saturday morning cartoon and less of a, they changed it up. They got rid of the other three members, Fred, Velma, and Daphne. They did do that during this Scooby and Scrappy era, but it just didn't feel like a mystery or a monster type of thing. They did bring a recurring villain in. It was one of the first times they did that, if you don't count Red Harry and a pup named Scooby-Doo. The recurring villain, I call him Dr. Ham. I can't really know, I don't really remember his original name, but I call him Dr. Ham because whenever he's on screen, he is hamming it up. He's the delight, honestly. He's the best part of the show. I'm not really the biggest fan of Shaggy. I'm not really the biggest fan of Scooby in this show, so that the main characters of the show I'm not the biggest fan of. I'm just not. But the villain was so charming, so funny, that he made the show watchable. But it was the weakest period of Scooby-Doo for me. And then I just ignored the next show that came out, and it was even worse to me. The Mystery Incorporated, though, brought back that type of artistry, from that type of art style from the What's New and the Where Are You era. They were bringing it back, more retro feel, new and old at the same time. So I gotta get into that. I have a season set somewhere, I just haven't watched it yet. And then after that, I did rant about Velma. So Velma, I'm not gonna start with that again. Today is as you were reading in the video title, today we're talking about one of the many film sets that they've released of the Scooby-Doo era. They released these a bunch of times. They re-released these in movie sets, box sets, and these are the types of sets I usually like to collect, since there's so many of these Scooby-Doo made for TV and direct-to-video movies. There's so many of these, over 20, over 30 of them, and I'm gonna be honest with you, instead of having about 30 original DVD cases of these movies, I'd rather just collect 8 film sets. I'm just gonna be honest with you, I'd rather just collect 8 film sets. So here we go. Here is an 8 film set of the Scooby-Doo, the greatest mystery adventures collection. Now, naturally, they're not like 8 chronological films, they're just 8 of the many films. One of them being one of the original 4 of that revival run. Now, if you can't read this, I'm gonna read it out for you. We have Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase, Chill Out Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo Abracadabra-Doo, Scooby-Doo Mask of the Blue Falcon, Scooby-Doo Stage Fright, Scooby-Doo and Kiss Rock and Roll Mystery, Scooby-Doo Shaggy's Showdown, and Scooby-Doo and the Gourmet Ghost. Now, this covers pretty much the whole era of Scooby-Doo, from the revival era all the way to current era Scooby-Doo, at least current era pre-Velma. So it does cover a big chunk. Chill Out Scooby-Doo is in the What's New era. Abracadabra-Doo is in post What's New era, but pre-Mystery Incorporated era. And then we got these two here, which were released roughly, I think, during the Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue, and that other Scooby-Doo show that I didn't watch, but pre-Mystery Incorporated. But these are like the pre-Mystery Incorporated era. They're bringing back the original designs for the characters. And then we have the Scooby-Doo and Kiss movie that came out during the Mystery Incorporated era, as far to my knowledge. My knowledge that Scooby-Doo is pretty much the older stuff. So the newer stuff, most of this was new to me, outside of, like, the Cyber Chase. I have seen the Cyber Chase many times as a kid, and I was glad to see it here, because I just don't often see the Cyber Chase in these movie sets. So when I saw it, I had to get it. I hadn't seen these other 7 films, so I thought, why not give them a shot? Why not give these movies a shot? The movies tend to be a little bit more better than, say, a standard episode of the regular TV shows. For example, Chill Out Scooby-Doo, I would say, is a better story overall than most of the What's New Scooby-Doo episodes. Mainly because it has more runtime. It has more time to focus on the characters, on their relationships, on their dynamics, on the shenanigans of Shaggy and Scooby, and on the motives of the villains. It really helps you get into the groove of finding out who might be the monster, who the monster might be, what's going on. You can figure it out as you're watching it. It's a delightful thing. I like the length. The length is roughly between 70 to 80 minutes. All of these are less than 80 minutes, but all of them are over 70 minutes, so that's that perfect mark for a Scooby-Doo film. You don't need to be a 2-hour Scooby-Doo movie unless you're like being this big thing. Otherwise, I'd say a 70 to 80 minute movie is the perfect runtime. So none of these outstay their welcome. None of them feel like they're dragging out. They're filled with a lot of content, and they're just a delight. They're not like the best ever, but they're not bad either. And I found something to like out of all of these. I'll give a mini review on each one of these. Some of them I'll talk about a lot longer than others, and some of them I'll barely mention at all. We're going to start with the Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase here. Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase was the 4th film in the revival era, which is basically the pre-What's New Scooby-Doo era. The revival era, to me, is Zombie Island, Witch's Ghost, Alien Invaders, and Cyber Chase. Now, I've got all 4 of these. The Cyber Chase is just the only one on this set. We've got Witch's Ghost on another 8-film set, and then we have a double feature that has Zombie Island and Alien Invaders, so I do have all 4 of them. Cyber Chase is the last one that this team that animated the Zombie Island, the revival era, worked on. It's the last one. And this would also be the last of the 4 films to not feature Casey Kasem. The 4 revival era movies, to my knowledge, did not have Casey Kasem, who was Shaggy's original voice actor, voicing the character. Though Frank Welker did return to voice Fred. Frank Welker is just a delight. He has consistently voiced this character from the late 60s all the way to now. So, well, he hasn't voiced him in Velma, but hey, I don't consider that part of this. So, yeah. But, outside of that, outside of a pup named Scooby-Doo, because you know they're kids and all that stuff, Frank Welker has voiced Fred consistently. His voice just remained consistent all the way. And in the revival era, you would think after about 20 to 30 years, would Frank Welker's voice still be as good? Yes, it is. He comes right back into the role like he never left it. And it's a delight seeing these characters together again and watching these year by year. This was my theatrical experience of Scooby-Doo, these first 4 films. I believe we had this one on VHS clamshell. The others I didn't have, but I ended up watching Cyber Chase a lot, many times as a kid. I don't have the VHS clamshell anymore, but so that's why I was glad to find this. I remember loving this movie as a kid, and when I watched it again as a grumpy older person, it was not as good as I remembered, but it had the potential to be something incredible. I have no problems with the art design. They went digital instead of the original style, the original of the first three. This was the start of the digital animation era, so they were going to do digital for this movie. All these are digital animated, but I have no problems with that. I have no problems with the characters. I have no problems with this. With the Phantom Virus. Well, I have a few problems with Phantom Virus, but I have no big problems with him. So what is it about this movie that just doesn't do it for me anymore? Well, I think it's because it feels rushed. And what do I mean by it feels rushed? I mean, this feels like this should have been like the focus of a whole TV series. You know how the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, imagine if the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, that entire series, was just a 75-minute movie, which means Shaggy and Scooby would have to hunt down all 13 ghosts in a 75-minute runtime, which means you would probably have a 3-minute montage where they capture over half of them in a montage, instead of actually giving you time to look into the world, look into the area, look at all that stuff. And I think that is the perfect example I can provide you for what I feel is the problem with Cyber Chase. In Cyber Chase, our game, this is the post-Matrix era, right? Everything was trying to bring that video gamey aspect, everybody being trapped in the video game, trapped in the Matrix type of thing. Well, the Cyber Chase is no difference there. They brought that in, so the Matrix stuff was thrown all over the place, Scooby-Doo and the Matrix and all that stuff. If you've watched these original 4 movies, you know the story and the synopsis. I'm not going to waste time talking about that. But the video game aspect of this, with the gang being trapped in a video game, there's 10 levels. The first 3, I believe it's the first 3. The first 3 levels are fine. I don't really have problems with them, though they do feel kind of rushed just a little bit. But then they streamlined it. They went from 4 to the final level. So they basically 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9... Like 6 levels. They do 6 levels in a montage. A 3-minute montage of just flying through these levels, and they're far more interesting than levels 1 and 2 and 3, at least in my opinion. They were far more interesting. There's a lot of stuff that you really want to know about that happens in those levels that they just fly through. Some of the animation is a little bit better in them. It's just streamlined. And, I feel like this could have been a TV show. I feel like this might have been somebody's idea for a TV show, but they decided not to do that for whatever reason. And they decided, we'll give you a shot, we'll let you get this out there, but you have to make it a movie, and you have to make it under 80 minutes. So, I imagine all the screenwriters, there's about 8 or 9 of them on this thing, I think. I imagine a lot of those guys had to do this big boardroom meeting, cutting down this big original idea that somebody had, and to carve it into a 75-minute movie. I feel like a lot of stuff got left out of here. Now, I haven't done any background research on this, I'm just spitballing my theories, and sometimes I can end up being very on the money with these types of theories that I have. So who knows? Maybe if I do some research behind it, I might end up being right. I don't know. But it feels like this should have been a TV show. I don't know how long. Maybe about 1 or 2 seasons. Kind of like the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. That type of length. Have the runtime be about 20-25 minute episodes for each level, so maybe give it about a 10 to 13 episodes. Some levels could be 2 episodes each, so maybe have it a 13 episode series, and then your final level, the 10th level, could be your movie length movie. The final level could be the 75-minute special. And I feel like that would have given the Scooby-Doo, the Cyber Chase, the time it needed to be the best that it could have been. Because while Zombie Island, Alien Invaders, and Witch's Ghost, they all feel like movies, this feels like somebody went into big idea and just played butcher with everything and tried to condense everything into was tiny, tiny. And while it's very enjoyable, I can see things that might be missing that I would have wanted to be in there. I would have wanted to see more of this. It feels like they added lines into this movie just to cover some plot holes that they ended up making because they had to cut a lot of stuff out. So there's a lot of redubs and things like that, at least in my theoretical opinion. It feels like this could have been a lot bigger than it was. So Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase is a very fun movie as a kid. As an adult, I'm just very more critical of it. Though I still enjoyed it. I still enjoyed watching it. I'd love to watch it again and again, but I'd probably watch the original first three, a lot more often than I would this one. But it's still a very pleasant experience through and through. I just wanted more, to be honest with you. Chill on Scooby-Doo, there's not much to say about this one. It's in the What's New Scooby-Doo era. It has the What's New Scooby-Doo designs for the characters. Casey Kasem has come back, and let me see what year this was made. It should say the year on the disc here. Where do we have it? 2007. Yeah, we're at the tail end. It's at the tail end here of Casey Kasem's run, the return run as Shaggy. Somewhere around the 2010s, he would be leaving, and Lillard, who played Shaggy in the live-action Scooby-Doo movies of the early 2000s, would be hired to voice Shaggy from then on in these movies and in Mystery Incorporated, I think. But Lillard's a very good one, but Casey is the definitive Shaggy to me. Though I really like the guys who tried to play Shaggy in the original 4 movies of the revival era. Chill on Scooby-Doo, standard What's New Scooby-Doo episode, just at movie special length. There's not too much to say about it. It's just a very pleasurable experience. You can watch it, you can enjoy it, your kids will enjoy it. You can even enjoy it if you remember watching it as a kid, and even if you've never watched it as a kid, but you have watched other Scooby-Doo shows as a kid. If you watched What's New Scooby-Doo as a kid, you'll probably enjoy Chill on Scooby-Doo. It's just a very standard Scooby-Doo experience. Scooby-Doo Abracadabra-Doo is a delightful experience, especially if you're a fan of Shaggy. Shaggy gets to have a sort of pseudo-girlfriend in Velma's little sister. Little sister, she's a teenager now, as both as Shaggy and little sister are teenagers. So about a 1 to 2 year difference between Velma and her sister. But it's a very, very fine. It's a very fine little. It's cute that Shaggy gets to have a little something that they don't often do in these shows. They don't often tackle romance in these shows, though I haven't seen Mr. Incorporated. Somebody told me Mr. Incorporated was full of this romantical stuff, and I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. I like it when it's very rare, because they shouldn't focus the whole thing about the romanticals. They should focus on the mystery. That's what they, you know? But it was fine. It didn't overshadow the mystery of the story, and this was actually one of the better mystery stories of the whole set here. So if you watch this, you'd probably be thrown for a loop over who might end up being the bad guy at the end, because I was actually wrong, and I'm usually right most of the time on who the bad guy is in these movies, but I was surprisingly thrown off with Abracadabra-Doo. So it was a surprising twist. I liked it. Mask of the Blue Falcon is a delight, and story-wise, it is an incredibly standard factory shipped out story. It's very basic, very, very mid. It's not anywhere near the best, and it's not anywhere near the worst. It's just a very standard experience. But if you are a fan of Hanna Barbera, if you are a fan of Hanna Barbera's rabbit hole of shows that they've been throwing out since the 60s, if you are a fan of all of those stuff, if you liked watching the Jetsons on Boomerang, the Flintstones, if you knew Birdman had a TV show in the 60s and 70s before Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, if you remember Herculoids, if you remember Space Ghost's original show before he had Coast to Coast, if you remember all of these classic shows, this is going to be a real Easter egg hunt for you. The gang ends up going to a Comic-Con. But the fun thing is, every single cosplay at this Comic-Con is a character from one of Hanna-Barbera's vault of shows. You have people cosplaying as Space Ghost, people cosplaying as Hawkman, Birdman. You have people cosplaying as George Jetson, Fred Flintstone. You have all of these shows, all of these characters making a cameo as a cosplay, and it was just a delight getting to see all of that, getting to see all of the references and Easter eggs. That first half of the movie was very, very satisfying to me. And I really liked how they worked in classic Adam West Batman references into this movie as well. Because now that Warner Brothers has their grip on both DC and Hanna-Barbera, they can make those references. In the 70s, I believe it was more of a license deal. I don't know, don't quote me on that. I don't know when Warner Brothers acquired Hanna-Barbera. But during the 70s, Hanna-Barbera made a show called The Super Friends. And the Super Friends, I believe they owned the rights to 4 of the big DC superheroes, at least for their TV show. They had Batman and Robin, Superman, Aquaman, and Wonder Woman, the big 4 at the time. And then most of the other superheroes they put in their Justice Friends show, the Super Friends show, they ended up having original characters, like the Wonder Twins. That other dude that I can't remember, the Native American guy that could get really, really big. And then there's this other guy who would do lightning and stuff. I don't remember everybody's names, but they had a lot of original shows in that show, you know. And they're in there with their cosplays. So that's very nice to see. What else can I think about? Oh yeah, the Adam West thing. The Blue Falcon is basically Adam West's Batman. The original they end up meeting Blue Falcon's original actor, who basically sounds just like Adam West. He has Adam West's same vocalizations. They have Adam West's grumpiness over the new Batman, the edgier Batman, and he misses the old days of when he was the star. It was very nice. And there was a lot of parodying and satire in the movie industry stuff. They ended up showing a remake of the Blue Falcon at this Comic-Con, and it's basically just a big, edgier thing, and they ended up having an Easter egg and a nod to the Transformers live-action movies, and they ended up making jokes about that as well. So it was very, very pleasant. If you are a big fan of movies, if you're a big fan of Hanna-Barbera, even if this film is a very basic and mid-film, you're going to like it. You're going to love all the Easter eggs. You're going to love identifying all of the costumes and cosplays. You're going to get the movie references. You're going to get all that stuff, and you're going to walk away very satisfied. Scooby-Doo Stage Fright is a interesting one. In fact, I think it's one of the funnier ones. It plays on the Phantom of the Opera type of story, but instead of just one dude being the Phantom, there's a lot of people being Phantom. Half the people introduced that are part of the Mr. Inc. gang ends up being the Phantom. Everybody you meet, you're going to go like, okay, who's the Phantom? It's going to be pretty basic. Phantom of the Opera storyline, blah, blah, blah. Somebody must win. The guy has a crush on one of the people in the talent show, and that guy wants that guy to win. They're trying to get all the other contestants to drop out of the contest and all that stuff. It's pretty standard Phantom of the Opera retelling at the start, and then you unmask the first Phantom, and then the Phantom is still going on out there, so they capture that Phantom, and then they see the Phantom is still going on, and they capture that Phantom, and then the Phantom's going on over here, so they capture him, and then the Phantom's over here, so like everybody's the Phantom. And that was pretty funny to me. So Stage Fright is pretty funny. It's a good one. Scooby-Doo and Kiss Rock and Roll Mystery is amazing. It is amazing. It is amazing. If you are a fan of Kiss, you're going to love this movie. If you are a fan of Kiss, the comic books, you're going to love this movie. If you're a fan of the lore behind the characters, the demon, the spaceman, the star child, the Catman, if you are a fan of all that stuff and the lore, the superpowers, and all that DC knockoff, rip-off stuff, and the whole Green Lantern meets heavy metal meets Hanna-Barbera, this is gonna be that film that you are gonna love, man. Scooby-Doo and Kiss Rock and Roll Me is a trippy movie, and the animation is amazing. It's the best I've ever seen Scooby-Doo look, and that's crazy to me. So, definitely check out this movie. Definitely check out this movie. Shaggy Showdown is pretty standard. I don't have anything to say about it. Basically, Wild West. Shaggy's in the Wild West, and he has an ancestor who looks just like him. And this ancestor ends up having a bad rep as a very bad outlaw. And then you learn that somebody was just smearing Shaggy's ancestor's name to go around committing crimes and blaming it on Shaggy's ancestor. So that was pretty fun. It's Shaggy inherits his ancestor's skill as a horseman. So that was pretty fun. It was a very solid thing. If I were to say which one is the weakest on the set, though, I would probably say it's either Shaggy Showdown or Chill Out Scooby-Doo. They're both very serviceable, but they're just not very memorable. They don't stand out as much to me. Scooby-Doo and the Gourmet Ghost, though, I really enjoyed it. They have a lot of references, satire, references to cooking shows. A lot of people end up playing themselves, hyperbolically fictionalized versions of themselves. One of these chefs ends up being Fred's uncle, and that's how they go up to this cooking school hotel place that ends up being from colonial times. Fred has an ancestor who was a major cook in the colonial times who invented takeout, so that was pretty funny. Shaggy and Scooby loved this cooking place, and that was very fun. There's a lot of jokes, hijinks, and then again, it's a very solid mystery. If I were to compare between Abracadabradoo and the Gourmet Ghost, these two are two of the best mysteries in this set. As in, you are going to be involved in trying to figure out who might be the bad guy. It might be pretty obvious, but then there's a bunch of red herrings, and you're going to go, This one might be a little bit easier to solve than Abracadabradoo, in my opinion, but they're still a very enjoyable experience. Overall, all 8 of these films are solid entries. You can watch them. They're extremely watchable. Some of them may have aged poorly, like Cyber Chase, but they're still worth watching. So I would honestly say, definitely take a look at this. If you could find this in a bargain bin somewhere, if you can find this at a dollar store, or used media dollar store, if you can even find it at Walmart, if it's still there at Walmart, take a look at the Scooby-Doo Greatest Mysteries Adventures Collection. You're not going to be disappointed.